Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canam Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. This is a missing persons edition. And hold on to your socks because this is going to be a good one. And as many of you know, and I hope all of you know, I'm the executive producer of Missing 411, the UFO Connection. And since I've made that, a lot of people have come out of the woodwork thinking I make a lot of wild claims about UFOs and their involvement in missing people. I don't make any claims. I just report the facts and what people say. And I tie together various factors that any 12-year-old would see that are associated. I've gotten a lot of good press out of the movie. I've got a lot of really good comments from people. The most common comment is, Dave, I watched it 2 or 3 times. I've had people say they watched it 6 times. It's content rich, and it's the first time I've ever delved into the UFO topic. I've kind of known it's always been there, but this is the first time where we really got some concrete items to put in that I really couldn't ignore. I would have been deficient if I just ignored them. So that's Missing 411, the UFO Connection. But there's 3 movies out there that I've made. Missing 411 is the first one. Les Stroud's Survivor Man is in that. And then Missing 411, The Hunted. If you want to get DVDs for the movie, you come see me. On my website, NA, like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. You go to the online store. And I've got the movies, all of our books, probably the best USB in the world. And that's called The Track Record. And it's got 3,000 pages of documents on it. And it's from a man who wrote a newsletter about Bigfoot, UFO, everything. So I scanned them all, put it on a USB. You can get that from us. It's called The Track Record. So, why we're here today, talking about missing people. Now, a lot of you send me missing people, but I appreciate that. But I guess I don't make it clear enough that we only research cases that match our profile points. And in each of the 11 books I've written about missing people, I outline what those missing profile points are. And not every case has every profile point. And we have 64 areas in North America where there's clusters of missing people. And then there's other places around the world. There's a total of 16 countries that have cases that match our profile points. And I'm going to guess 90% of the countries in the world probably have these cases, but because of language barriers, reporting barriers, investigative vetting issues, it's really hard to believe some of the information we get out of some countries. So I'm always open to hearing from, especially the Scandinavian countries. I really know that there's many more cases there than I've written about, but I don't hear from you guys much. But I do believe they are there. Let's get to some letters because there's some good ones this week. Hey, Mr. Paulides, I could really use your input on an event I went through. You asked for some interesting stories on things that happened in the woods. I also think you'll find part about shoes particularly interesting. I know you read the letters. This is not written with that in mind, but feel free to, if you wish, just leave out the exact location. I won't say the exact location, but it's in the area of Wynoochee Dam in Washington. It's about as close as I'll get. I was on a hiking trail paralleling a river in the area. It was in the afternoon. Following a day of fishing, I was on a level section of trail that was clear of debris. Out of nowhere, I was hit from behind and knocked to the trail about 15 feet. I was stunned, lying face down in the dirt. I got to my knees and looked around trying to figure out what just happened. I'd been walking, but hit the ground as if I had been running down a steep incline. I never heard or saw anything unusual. I got to my feet and walked back up the trail thinking I must have tripped over something. There was nothing on the trail, but I looked about and I noticed my socks getting wet and realized my shoes were gone. As I began looking for my shoes, I realized my glasses were missing. I found those in the trail mangled where I'd landed on them and slid a ways. I bent them back into shape, replaced a lens that had come out. I went back to looking for my shoes. I found my right shoe on the left side of the trail and my left shoe on the right side of the trail, both several feet into the bush. The shoes I was wearing were Keens made for hiking. They were low tops with elastic laces. Later, I tried my best to kick these shoes off and I could not. I know they would come off easier when a taller boot with hard laces, but still, what the heck? I still believe I was hit from behind because I remember feeling an impact, but at the same time, the acceleration I experienced was disproportionate to the impact. It's as if my back was being pulled through my chest. It makes no sense. I will add that I was never sore like I should have been getting knocked that far down the trail. When I spend any time thinking about this event, I now writing this, I get an emotional uneasiness that has been getting stronger over time as opposed to waning away. It took me some time, but I wrote this account hoping that you'd give me some insight. Don't know what happened, but I wish I did. Well, I've never heard a story like that, but I've been to many fatal traffic accidents and investigated several where the victim was knocked out of their shoes. Some were wearing cowboy boots. When you get hit with high velocity, your lower extremities tend to relax. And I think it's an unconscious response. And when they relax and you accelerate mightily, it is very common for shoes or feet to come out of shoes. First time I saw it, I remember a very seasoned investigator said, "No, Dave, this happens all the time. And during your career, you're going to see it multiple times." And where those shoes are located is very close to the point of impact because they really don't move a whole lot. So wherever this person found their shoes, that's just about the point of impact. Now, where they stated that their back was almost coming through their chest, if you were hit that hard and you were knocked out of your shoes, there would have been a very good chance you would have fractured your skull, had a severe concussion. I guarantee you would have had a huge bruise, if not broken bones, on your back. So something very strange happened here. It wasn't a normal collision to knock you out of your shoes. I don't know what, but it's very strange. So the date of this incident was March 15th, 2023. A few days ago, I witnessed an unexplained aerial phenomena. I live in Ridgefield, New Jersey, about 15 minutes away from New York City via the George Washington Bridge. This town is not rural. It's an upper middle class suburban neighborhood. Regardless, we have lots of deer that roam, so much so that they have become a danger and nuisance to the residences. I noticed at least 2 car accidents in the months due to the deer population here. Speaking of deer population, Angie and I had to drive about 2 hours from our house to do something at this other city. And during the drive, I think we counted 10 deer dead on the side of the road. And it's not that unusual. There's so many deer in northern Montana that they wander out at night and they get hit. It's a sad thing. And when you understand that there's a Montana law that if you hit a deer, you can take the deer. And I mean, seriously, put it in the back of your truck, call Fish and Game, tell them what happened, and they'll give you the approval to take it. It's not a big deal. But to see that many on the side of the road was weird. I'm surprised more people didn't take them. On with the letter. I live in a modest home with my family. I work the night shift. This was my day off, and I was up late due to my sleep cycle. I was smoking in my backyard around 1 a.m. that night. Suddenly, the power in my neighborhood cut off. I wasn't sure if it was the entire block, but the street lamps in the view of my yard just cut off for no apparent reason. Not sure what made me look up, but when I did, there it was. It was not directly above me, but at a low enough angle that I could differentiate between the belly of the object and the top portion. Top side seemed to be cloaked, as I could only see it distorted by the sky. Similar to the fictional Predator distortion cloak, it was spherical in shape and had 3 white lights on the bottom side. The lights were in a triangular formation. It was emitting a humming sound and were pulsating in volume. 3 lights in a triangular formation. As I stared at it, a car pulled over along my sidewalk. I walked over to see if all was okay. The man in the car looked confused. I asked him if he was okay. He told me that his car just shut off suddenly. This explained why he pulled over. It turns out that he was delivering food for Uber Eats. I told him to look up. I would have told him, hey, give me your food. I'll buy it from you. Look up as I pointed in the direction of the object. Right as his eyes met with the craft, I ran inside my house to make sure everything was okay. The power was still out, so I did a quick round the dark. Everyone was sound asleep. I went back outside and watched the craft dart upward and out of sight. It did not simply blink away, but clearly moved outward and upward at a ridiculous speed. The power to the neighborhood came back seconds later. The delivery driver could not start his car until several attempts. It was a relatively new car. I went and got some jumper cables, and the rest is history. He was gone. The driver was more concerned about getting the heck out of there than in recording the craft. I have no evidence of this sighting. All I have is my memory. My phone was charging in my bedroom the entire time. I didn't have the presence of mind to record regardless. I was simply amazed by what I was looking at. It is truly amazing how many times people see something in the sky and don't record it. It seems like it's more common than not. It's almost as though a part of your brain shuts down and you're no longer a cameraman or a videographer, you're an observer. Now in that instance, his phone was in the house. That's kind of coincidental, wasn't it? Next one. Hey Dave, I just came across a story that you'd be interested in if you haven't heard of it. But it was on Coast to Coast. A trauma surgeon was skiing on a mountain in Colorado. It wasn't specified. But he was with his wife and her sister, and heavy snow blew in. They decided to go down the mountain early to be cautious and get split up, of course. And when the surgeon is backtracking to get to the girls, he describes what sounds like a cone of silence. He gets a sense of dread and then goes back up the mountain on foot and discovers an injured skier, unconscious and dying. He just happened to need a trauma surgeon, which ultimately saved his life. I guess this is one of those times where the phenomena helped someone. I do find it interesting that whatever this was, it will act just enough to bring a third party to help, but won't act directly. Makes you wonder if they can or they just won't. What I find unusual about that, since I've been skiing since I was 6, going back up the mountain is a huge chore. And you try not to do that ever with skis on. Never heard the story? I'd like to talk to that trauma surgeon and find out what he experienced with that cone of silence. Next letter. Hey Dave, here's my large orb near-miss collision story. In '83, me and my 2 sisters and mom were headed home by car. One evening when my younger sister noticed a very bright star in the sky. We all started watching it and then it started to dance around. We knew then it wasn't a star. It would zoom in all directions, eventually descending to maybe 1,000 feet above the ground. After a few minutes, we lost sight of it. Stop there. I've seen the exact same thing once in my life. But I was with 3 friends. We're laying in sleeping bags looking at the sky. I'm way up in Northern California near the Oregon border camping. We watched this go on for 2 hours. I'll never forget it. I think I was 22, 23, new policeman. Bizarre. As we turned onto our rural street, we came to a curve in the road. Before we started the curve, out of nowhere, a light green glowing orb about the size of a VW Beetle shot down and was headed straight for us. There was no sound whatsoever. We were all screaming as our car was flooded with extreme bright greenish yellowish light. The light was glowing so bright we couldn't make out any edges to the object. My mother had to swerve to the side of the road to avoid colliding with the object. We were all hysterical, screaming, and we jumped out of the car running in all different directions. Thank goodness my mother had the presence of mind to knock on a neighbor's door, although she was shouting, "We just saw a UFO, we just saw a UFO." They must have thought we were out of our minds, but they listened to our story, we collected ourselves, and headed the remaining half-mile to our house. We told our father our incredible story as soon as we walked in the door, but all he did was laugh and joke. We were all terrified and thought his reaction was odd. If my spouse and kids relayed a story like that, I'd be asking questions, wanting to know every detail. Yet he never did. I've got friends like that. They don't want to know, because the truth probably would scare them to death. They don't have the ability to cope with something like this. Toward the end of his life, I brought up the incident and asked him what he thought about it. He said, "I believe you all saw a UFO," so I guess he did believe us eventually because he talked about the event so many times. We still talk about it. It was something we'll never forget. I just wish we knew where that object came from and why it almost collided with us. Thank you for reading my email. I appreciate all your hard work with the missing. On those hard, low days, you know there's a village of people who care about you. I keep you and Ben in our prayers, a loyal villager. Thanks for keeping us in your prayers. It's needed. And I'm one of those people who believes in the power of prayer, because I truly believe it helps. Dear Sir, and this didn't turn out too good, but I'll show you. In this group of pics, I would point out that the time is from 4:29 to 4:44 p.m. on March 4th, 2023. The camera is aimed to the southwest. The shadows should not be coming from behind the camera. The pixelation in these photos give the appearance of a swarm, S-W-A-R-M, but termites or ants don't swarm this time of year in Georgia or anything else to my knowledge. Maybe nothing, but it makes me ponder. I'd like to add an unusual story to this email. On Saturday, March 11th this year, my hunting partners were hunting for hogs on the same property as pics were taken, and around 9:30 p.m. started seeing hundreds of flickering flashes moving in a floating motion, but definitely in a certain direction. These lights were from the ground level up in the trees. There was no sounds associated with these lights. It scared both of them to the point they did not want to tell the other what they saw. I'd like to point out that the fireflies in Georgia do not emerge until late May or June, and lights seen were not yellow, but thanks for that. So, the one picture that he sent that I thought would turn out decent didn't really turn out that well, but I'll show you anyhow. You can barely tell, but there's a tree right here. And over here on the far right, kind of near the bottom, it looks like a swarm of bugs that goes shh. And there's a darker swarm back here that you can kind of see. But the darkest one is right here, and it comes from the ground. It just looks like a massive swarm of bugs. Now, why did I read that story? Well, about 8 years ago, a friend sent me a photo where he was driving down a road in Oregon, and he stopped. And he had a good camera, and he took a picture. And it's a swarm of something going right up through the middle of the road to as high as he could see in the sky. He said he didn't know what the bugs were, because it was a very cold night, so it wouldn't have been mosquitoes. And he said, I don't think it's gnats. But then the other question was, is it even bugs? I don't know. But that was on a cold night in Oregon during the spring. And yeah, it was an odd picture. I sent it to a photographic expert friend. He said he'd never seen anything like it either. So, next letter. Dave, I want to share an experience I had with an orb. Plus, I'll send you a photo that I captured of it. See what you think. Make sure I have the picture. Oh, yes, I do. I live about 11 miles from the little town of Longville, Minnesota. We're surrounded by water with all lakes and rivers around us. I've had a few odd things happening to me since last fall. First time I noticed something was amiss, I was staying at my sister's house. I was lying in bed, and I had set my phone and reading glasses on a small table beside me. I was startled when my reading glasses went tumbling onto the floor. Picked them up, set them beside my phone again, crawled back into bed, and they went flying onto the floor again. This time, out into the middle of the floor. I'm no stranger to odd things happening around me, so I figured it was someone being mischievous or just trying to get attention. Put my glasses in my travel bag, and I figured I could finally get some sleep. After about 5 minutes went by, and I was dozing off when I heard a loud bang as my phone hit the floor. I got up, stuffed my phone in my travel bag now as well. As the months went by, I had my phone dropped on the floor a few more times. It doesn't just drop straight down from where it's sitting. I know many people would speculate that it was on vibrate and jiggled off the table, but this is much more like it got smacked off. One afternoon I was getting ready to make some bread. I got out my recipe card and set it on the table. I walked over to the fridge, and on my way back to the table I saw my recipe card fly across the table and out into the middle of the floor. That's pretty freaky. When these things happen, I can feel a strange energy around me. It's almost like you can feel someone standing next to you, but you can't see them. There are many times it will bump into me. Very light bump, sometimes on the arm, wrist, leg, and back of my head. One night I was getting ready for bed. This was on January 23rd, 2023. It was close to midnight. I started to feel a strange energy again, and the lights in the bathroom started to flicker. Then something was bumping me on the back of my head. I'm getting so used to it that I didn't turn around and look. An ornamental glass bowl sits in the corner next to our shower. After the nudges on the back of my head, then I could hear it bumping into the glass bowl and making a clinking sound. I thought I'd give it a shot and try to capture this mischievous thing on camera. I know this is near impossible because they can pick up in your thoughts without taking a picture. They could sense the energy from the phones and the cameras. I grabbed my phone and kept telling myself I better check my emails before I go to bed, trying to put a different thought into my head besides thinking of taking the picture. I got the camera up on my phone and walked back into the bathroom. The lights were still going crazy and I still feel the strange energy. I stood with the shower behind me and then started tapping the camera button, all the while thinking about scrolling through my emails. Finally, the lights quit flickering and I couldn't feel the energy in the room. So then I was excited to see what my phone might have captured. I had about 40 pictures on my phone that I'd taken in that short time while standing there. So let me say something. What this person is doing is brilliant, because I know other people that have done the exact same thing and had great success. Second part of that is, don't take a picture like you would normally take a picture. Like if you want to take a picture that way, don't hold the camera up and take the picture that way. You're kind of sending message to everyone or anyone in the room, yep, camera's on, we're looking that way. No. Like you're reading your email, but taking a picture behind you. That's what you want to do. I have a really, really good friend, Scott Carpenter, in Tennessee. I don't care what anybody says. He's the one that developed taking pictures behind you when you're on a trail. And what he's accomplished and what he's photographed are no less than phenomenal. So, back to the story. I'm used to seeing orbs as round-shaped lights in photos. This one is odd because it's dark in the middle of a bright aura around it. When I enlarged the photo, I could see the orb. It shocked me to see what looked like a face. I used the contrast mode in my photo editor to see if I could bring out some of the features. The black and white one is the best because it shows light and shadow. I'll send you the photo. You can share them with the village if you'd like. See what they think. Do they see a face also? You wouldn't have to share what I seen in it. Sometimes it's better just to put the image out there. It'd be interesting to see how many people see a face, or is it just me? No, I'm going to show you it, and I see the face. Sent it to my sister without telling her what I saw, and right away she wrote back and said she saw a man's face. She said it looks like he has a long beard with ties in it. Same thing I saw. That's what this says in the letter. What was really strange is after my sister read the email I sent her with the photos in it, she went into her bathroom a while later and her light started to flicker. How crazy is that? Not crazy at all. Again, that's the hitchhiker effect. You start sending these things around on a chain, and these things fly around the room and fly around the internet. I think that there's something to it. I took even more photos later on to make sure it wasn't just a reflection on the shower door. I like to do my research before coming to a conclusion. Thank you for all you do, Dave. Keep shining the light on mental illness. You have helped a lot of people. Lots of love to you, Angie, and Huck. Love to hear your thoughts. So, this is the picture taken behind them. And you can see right here where the circle is, there's something peering around the door. That is weird. Now what they did is they enlarged that circle. It's very hard to see, but I do see a face there. Facial features. And there's the beard that they're talking about. I have no idea what it is, but I think it's something. Just saying, I think it's something. Thanks for that. That was a very interesting note. Next one. Hey Dave, I ran across a British medium a while ago, and today I was watching her video on suicide. She's a former law enforcement officer, and she's British. She has a body sense of humor and feels very honest. I'd written to you shortly after Ben passed over, and I'm attaching an email as a way of providing some context on my next bit of information. I remember seeing Ben surrounded by beings. In my medium experiences, I'd never seen or felt this kind of thing before. I knew where he was, from a distance, but I couldn't see him because of those that surrounded him. I'm watching a video of Nikki Allen, and she talks about how those that decide they're done here and exit are treated with love and healing from the seraphim. She called them the oldest order of angels. I don't know anything about angels, but I believe her. Well, I have no idea if it's true, but Angie and I were contacted by a medium in Canada after Ben passed. And she said that when Ben left, he was immediately escorted by an angel and walked through. I hope so. That's all I'll say. Okay, some news, some interesting news. For the people that live in Tennessee, I've spent a lot of time in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. Well, guess what the park is doing? They're putting license plate readers in the park to know who's coming in. So they can read your plate, know your name, know where you live. And the Park Service has always complained that they don't have enough money to do infrastructure work. Well, then why are they buying license plate readers? Seems like a big invasion of our privacy. Google it, you'll find the information that they're doing this. Interestingly, Great Smoky Mountain National Park is one of the parks that doesn't charge an entrance fee. But what they've just started to do recently is charge for parking. No, one way or another, they're going to get you. Next letter. Hey, Dave. First off, let me thank you for all the work that you've done that brings awareness to those around the world. There are things that we cannot fully explain that we need to be aware of. I'm an avid outdoorsman and I love the woods. I love camping. During the summer of 2019 in Arizona, my family and I went up to some of the highest elevations in Arizona to set up camp and do some fishing for a couple days. On the way up, we had some fuel issues in the diesel in our pickup truck. It actually was loaded down with fuel of an unleaded kind. The last place we stopped was Globe, Arizona. It had sold out of diesel. Can you believe that? Yeah, I can believe it. It's going to be a lot more of that goes on in the years ahead, unfortunately. Gavin Newsom in California just proposed a bill in their legislature to make a cap on what gasoline companies can charge for their product. I don't know how well that's going to go over in the gas stations in California. But California, you never know what they're going to do, which is why I left. All right, we got two very interesting stories for you today. And we're going to start with the first one that is very current. And it's about a lady, a First Nations lady. And First Nations is the Native Americans for Canada. This is the woman. Her name is Frances Brown. 53 years old, went missing October 14th, 2017. Now, Frances, First Nations, lived just outside of Doty, British Columbia, kind of in the central portion of BC, very, very remote area. Frances grew up with a father that was a trapper, hunter, outdoorsman, and she was pretty much a daddy's girl. She went with him since she was 8 years old, trapping, hunting, anything to do with the outdoors, Frances went. And what this gave her was an extreme appreciation for the wilderness. And her family knew she could handle herself. She knew the outdoors. She knew the dangers. Well, on October 14th, she went out with her cousin to an area east of Doty to go mushroom picking. Now, I have talked about subgroups before. Another big subgroup is hunters. Now, mushroom pickers are interesting. Hunters are up. They got their head on a swivel. They're looking under all directions. Mushroom pickers don't normally do that. They have their head down because they're looking for mushrooms. And if they're picking, they're down on all fours picking mushrooms, and they aren't looking behind them. They aren't looking up. Well, on October 14th, she went out with her cousin, and sometime during the day, the cousin said they got separated, and she didn't know how. But at about 4 p.m., the cousin went back to the car, and Frances wasn't there. So the cousin waited for an hour and then said, well, I better start looking. So she went back into the bush, looked for a couple hours, came back out, got home at about 9 o'clock. At 9:20, she called the RCMP in Smithers, BC. She told them that her aunt had a disability. She was deaf in one ear. Let's stop there for a second. The number of people I write about that have a disability is way higher than the national average. And when I read this, I'm not surprised anymore that I find this. So she was classified as having a disability. Well, the next day, October 15th, the RCMP in Smithers sends out a canine unit with the cousin to backtrack to the exact location where the cousin had last seen Frances. And they put the canine on the track, didn't go very far, came back, couldn't pick up a scent. So they called for more reinforcements. They called for all the hunters, more RCMP, more volunteers from the town, more First Nations people. They said they needed everyone they could get because it wasn't going to be quick. Well, that first night she was missing, it rained. And her cousin said that she was dressed warm, and she also had a lighter. She knew the area very well, but they also knew that Frances would go the deepest part of the woods looking for the best and the biggest mushrooms. Nothing really intimidated her. Well, RCMP brought in 3 more canine teams because it was such a large area. And the second day, they found a small fire. Not a campsite, I'd say, but a fire where somebody had a fire just the night before. And they knew it had to be Frances. Well, now they had 50 people in every day on the search with 3 canines. And after 6 days of nonstop searching, they gave up. And the search and rescue termed the search. The family said that they couldn't give up. She was too much a big part of their family. And what happened was they got even extended family members to keep searching every day until December. And then eventually snow forced them out of the area. Even as early as January and February the following year, they went back in again, searched again for weeks. In total, 19 different search and rescue organizations from throughout central British Columbia participated in the effort to find Frances. They didn't find anything other than one small fire that they thought she had started, but they weren't 100% sure. So let's think about this. Very remote area, not anywhere near a road or a highway. I read some things saying, well, maybe she's a victim of the Highway of Tears killer. No, that's a ridiculous thing to say because her cousin placed her in the middle of the wilderness far off the main highway. No one's going to be wandering around where she was. A very experienced person in the backcountry. Not somebody you would expect to go missing, nor somebody you would expect to die of hypothermia. And they stated that she was in very good health and had adequate clothing and shoes. Now her nephew, a man named Matthew Jefferson, took up her cause. And he ended up hiking all the way across Canada with a backpack and her picture on the back of the backpack, trying to bring forth interest in missing people. So Matthew Jefferson, good job, buddy. Now some of you have said, hey Dave, how come you never talk about the profile points anymore in some of these cases? Okay, well, I'll talk about them. First one. In the area where she went missing, here's the map. So this is Hudson Bay Mountain in the middle of central British Columbia. Here's Smithers right here, probably the biggest, closest city. Seymour Lake, Doughty. This is the search area. And then all the way up through this area, there's tons of lakes, creeks, and rivers. So, lots of water. She's in a subgroup. She's a mushroom picker. It's important. 4 different canines couldn't pick up her scent. Point of separation. Somehow or another, her and her cousin got separated. And disability. She's deaf in one ear. How does this happen? What happened to Frances? She was in good health. She knew the outdoors. She was wearing adequate clothing. She had the ability to start fire. Now, one thing I talk to people about, friends, if you're on the verge of death, don't be afraid about getting a big fire going. It's your life. They can put the fire out. They can't get your life back. Start a really big fire. And don't be concerned about it. Get it going big so people can see the smoke. And keep it going. Keep it stoked. And then get the biggest thing you have. Because they did put helicopters up on this search multiple times. And get out into an open area and get the, if you have a coat, swing it in a circle above your head. That's the best thing to be seen by a helicopter. Easiest thing to be seen. Who told me that? A helicopter search and rescue pilot. So I trust him. So Frances Brown, missing October 14th, 2017, never found. British Columbia. Next case. I talk about kids all the time. And this has a good ending, so don't go away and say I don't want to be depressed. No, this isn't a depressing case, but it's a challenging case to understand. Kathy Oscard, 16 months old. Missing September 15th, 1964, 3 p.m., 8 miles north of High Prairie, Alberta. So yeah, you're getting 2 Canadian cases today. Now this is sort of in the middle of Alberta. This is High Prairie, 8 miles north, right next to a whole series of lakes. Again, about in the middle of Alberta, equidistance between other provinces. British Columbia sits right over here. Now, our parents had a very rural farm, small farm. Kathy was 16 months old, could barely toddle around. Mom put her in the front yard, gone just a few minutes. And she knew there was a lot of wildlife in this area. And she came back, just a couple minutes, Kathy's gone. It's about 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Remember these times. Frances Brown disappeared at 4 p.m. Kathy disappears at 3 p.m. Most optimum time to leave or disappear, 4 p.m. So mom starts searching for her, can't find her, starts yelling for her, she doesn't respond. She gets on the phone, starts calling neighbors. There's nobody really close, but neighbor called neighbor, and pretty soon the RCMP shows up, and right after they start showing up, hundreds of locals start showing up. So the mother had searched for an hour and then called the friends at RCMP. By 6 p.m., the RCMP was there with a canine unit, and hundreds of people had started showing up. The canine unit was the first into the field to look for Kathy. Couldn't pick up a scent. Didn't have any idea. Kathy wasn't responding. Dog didn't smell anything. Now, when I said this area was wild, it's wild. Many of the articles said that there had been 2 bears that were killed in that immediate area in the distinct short past, like within the last couple days. Well, after the first canine unit went out, the RCMP officer on scene got more reinforcements in, and they set up a grid pattern to search. And they made it 1 mile wide and 2 miles long, which is what I would have done. And they based that on the geography and the age of Kathy. And what the mama said about how well she couldn't toddle around. The mother was dumbfounded that she even got out of the area and wasn't seen. Well, they start searching, and they search all the way till late at night. They're not finding anything. Kathy's not answering calls. Dogs aren't picking up the scent. Searchers aren't finding anything. They covered an area out to 1 mile with 300 searchers. and they didn't find, oh, I'm sorry, 400 searchers, and they hadn't found anything. And then late at that night, the light rain started to fall and the temperature dipped to 35 degrees. Now let me tell you something. Light rain, 35 degrees outside, 16-month-old child. This is an all-out emergency, folks. All-out emergency. Kids do not survive hypothermic conditions very well. 35 degrees and rain, that water will sap the heat right out of the body quickly. Now, there's some people in search and rescue say, no, let's keep the searchers out of the area until we can get more canines in. Baloney. When you have a small child and you have weather conditions like this, you put everybody you have out there in a grid pattern and you start marching and you start looking and you get everybody out there. In Missing 411, my first movie, I interviewed a sheriff who took part in a search for a missing child just like this, a little older. And that's exactly what he said. He said, well, the Park Service didn't want me to put all these people out there, but if I was in charge, I would have put everybody into the field because with a young child, you can't risk it. I agreed with him 100%. So in this case, Kathy hadn't been seen. No cars had been around the house. And at 4 a.m. the next morning, a local farmer, a man named William Bissell, who knew Kathy's parents, loved the little girl, shows up along with other farmers that get up really early in the morning when they said, hey, the fields can wait. I gotta help find your child. And he started close in on the house. He starts walking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And he's calling her name. And several hundred yards from the house, he hears something. Wasn't sure what he heard, but he's real quiet. He starts walking towards it. And 1/4 mile from the house, according to newspaper articles, this is the quote, in an area repeatedly searched, William finds Kathy sitting on the ground. She's barefoot and nearly naked. She wasn't nearly naked when she left, and she wasn't barefoot when she left, but she was when they found her. Nobody could believe where she was located. Nobody. William brings her back to the house. They call an ambulance. She's taken to the hospital as a precaution, and the doctor said she's in good condition. Wow. That's a miracle. That is a miracle. Divine intervention, almost. So my question is, why wasn't Kathy hypothermic? Wet, cold, outdoors, 16 months old? How did search and rescue miss her? But the better question, how did 4 canine dogs miss her? I know canines. I know how well they search. They don't miss stuff like this. And young kids, especially 16 months old, they're going to have distinct odors after being gone that long. And those odors can't be missed. But they were. Why didn't she respond to her name being called? And then one of the weirdest combinations, and I can't put my hand on this, and I can't understand why. But in a vast majority of these cases, it's not the search and rescue teams that find the victim. It's some private party. It's William Bissell, a good old boy farmer who's marching through the woods and finds her. She was held in the hospital just one day for precaution, went home. I can't tell you how many times these same sort of elements show up in these cases. Now this area of Alberta, yeah, there's other people missing there. And I've learned over the years to not discount any area for any reason. Something about Kathy Osgard at 16 months old happened. She wasn't sitting there a quarter mile away that entire time, and 400 searchers and 4 canines missed her. I'm sorry. I don't believe it. A lot of things happen in this world. I don't believe that. I don't think she could have been there. And another big point, folks. You have that many people in the bush looking for a little girl. You know what they're also going to find? They would have found her clothes and they would have found her shoes. But they didn't. They didn't find any of that stuff. Which is a key point. If she'd been taken from the area and her clothes had been taken off, maybe they were kept. Or maybe they were just left on the ground wherever she was taken. But they were not there. I don't know how many times I can tell these stories and not get emotional about it, but in this instance, I just know that the Osgards didn't quite get the totality of what happened to their daughter, or how many other little kids had this happen to them in the prior 100 years. And it would be interesting to know later in life how she did. And if she ever had any nightmares about this, or if she ever had any revelations about what might have happened. If anybody knows Kathy Osgard, O-S-C-A-R-D, she was born in '63, so good chance she's alive in Alberta. Born and raised in High Prairie, so I'd like to talk to her if you know her. But in the meantime, another Missing Persons episode is over. Thanks for being here. Please share this video on your social media. And a couple of my videos lately, I don't know what's going on. People either don't like them anymore, they're not giving a thumbs up, but I've been bushwhacked by some people lately and I'm not getting the thumbs up I used to. And a big one, this is really important. Make sure you're subscribed. A lot of people have stated, hey Dave, I thought I was, but then I went and checked and I wasn't. And the number of people who have been unsubscribed is unbelievable. But thank you. God's willing, I'll be back again, do another one of these. That's Huck saying, Dad, come on in, I need a belly rub. So, okay, Huck, I hear you, I'm coming. Be safe, be kind to your neighbors. Do something friendly for the people in the area where you live. We need more kindness in our world. Paulides out.